of an equation. So we built models of two-step equations. Now we are going to build models of multi-step equations, specifically equations that have variables on both sides of the equal sign now. So I am going to work through one of them for you. Unlike Class Kick, this isn't just going to appear on your screen like the work's done for you, but you can go back and do it after we do the first example together. So every single equation is going to start by asking you to build a model. So you'll see these directions that I have here in orange. It says double click the image below to build a model of the equation. If you just kind of type in here right now, it looks like it's not doing anything. You have to double click on it, and then it'll open up into a Google drawing. And so we are going to build a model of an equation. And exactly like two-step equations, multi-step equations work exactly the same way. That the equal sign is like the middle of a balance beam, and what you have on the left side of the equal sign will go on the left side of your little balance beam. What you have on the right side will go on the right side of your balance beam. And you have choices for how you would like to build your model. I personally could not care less how you do it as long as I can tell you understand what you're doing. So the left-hand side of my equation, I'm going to show you one way for me to do it. Again, I'm going to show you options in a minute. So on the left-hand side of my equal sign, I have an X and I have a 2. So remember, when there's no number in front of that X, it just means I have a single solitary little X. So if you scroll over here to the side, you see that you have little algebra tiles, little virtual ones that are draggable that you can work with. And the yellow are positives, and red is traditionally in most math classes used to model negative numbers, and that's the case here. So this is not a negative X, this is a positive X. So that means that I am going to take one of these little positive X's, and I'm going to drag it over here to the left side of my balance beam. And I also have a positive or a plus 2 here on the left side of my balance beam. So you could do a couple of different things. You could drag like 2 1s if you wanted to, or you can actually type right in these little boxes. So maybe you want to drag one over, you don't feel like dragging over 2 boxes. You can click inside of the box and change it to a 2. I'm okay with that, as long as I can tell that you understand that there should be an X and a 2 over there. If you don't like dragging stuff, I know since you guys, a lot of you don't have like mice on the Chromebooks you guys are working with, so sometimes using the trackpad, you don't necessarily like to do the dragging. So you could do this. You could add a text box, and you could just put a single X and then a 2 underneath it if you want to do that. I'm going to assume that means that you know there should be an X and a 2. Okay, so, or I'm not so good with using the little scribble. Maybe you guys are. I am not great with that at all. I could, oh, that's actually pretty decent. That's better than I normally do. So an X, if you want to make like 2 little units to represent the 2, you could do that too. Whatever, however you, yeah, told you I suck at using the scribble. So you could make 2 little units right here. I couldn't care less how you do it, as long as I know that you should build this model with an X, with 1 X, and then 2 units of some type there. Again, I'm going to have a tendency to drag the chips over there, or the algebra tiles, but it is your choice how you want to do it. On the right-hand side of my equal sign, the 17 minus 4x, and this is where when I drag stuff over, I'm not going to drag like 17 units over there, because I think that's kind of a waste of time. So I'm just going to drag, it's a positive 17, which means I'm still going to grab one of the yellow ones. And I'm just going to click in the box, and I'm going to change that 10 to a 17. And that's fine if you do that too, because that lets me know that you know there should be a positive 17 and that it should be on that side of the equal sign. And then last but not least, minus 4x. And this part might be different for us compared. We might not have seen a negative variable before. The same way that you can have a negative 4, you can have 4 x's that are also negative. So if I'm looking over here to the side, I'm not going to grab these guys right here. I'm not going to grab the yellow ones because that represents a positive x. I need 4 negative x's. So I'm going to drag over here. I'm going to drag 1, 2, 3, and 4 negative x's. It doesn't really matter that the 17 is kind of there in the middle, but just visually that kind of bugs me. So I'm going to move it over here. So I've built a model of the equation. X plus 2 is equal to 17 minus 4x. So that is the first thing that we are going to start with today. I'm going to ask you guys to go to breakout rooms and to collaborate with your groups. And all we're doing right now, you're going to see there's a whole bunch of other steps, but all we're doing right now is building these equations. Once you're satisfied and you think you've got your equation built, you're going to click Save and Close, and then voila, the new model goes right here. Now, you can actually check to see whether or not your model is correct. If you look at this, right, these directions right here, it says click, oh, I shouldn't say double click because that's actually not true. So we're going to expand, sorry, I used this before and I changed the directions and forgot to change them back. Okay, expand the image below to check and see if your model is correct. What this is a really teeny tiny picture that you can barely see. So what you'll do is just click on the corner, make it bigger, bam, see whether or not you did it correctly. So mine doesn't look exactly the same, like the arrangement is a little different, and I did forget that I added like a negative to my x's, but as long as it's red, I understand that you mean a negative. So the most important part of this activity, I'm obviously giving you the answers, right? I'm giving you the answers because that is the part I care the least about. I want to make sure that you understand why this represents a model of this particular equation, because we're going to do some steps later where we're actually going to start solving this sucker. We're not doing it right this second, though. I want you guys just to practice building them first to make sure we're good. And you can just hit undo if it bothers you to leave that big. So you'll see, if you scroll down, there's like some other steps here you're going to bypass. And you're just going to go right here to where it says model number 2. You've got another model to build. You've got another answer that you can click on to make bigger. Then you'll scroll down to where it says model number 3. Right there underneath model number 3 is another model. And model number 4. Do not do model number 5 yet. See where it says there's no key? Model number 5 is kind of going to be like your exit ticket for when we get done working on this, because we'll still be working on this on Thursday as well. So all you need to do is 1 through 4. And again, all you're doing right now is building your models. So I'm not stupid. I know that you could totally just expand all the answer keys and just copy down what's on there, and there's literally nothing I can do about that. However, that would not be a good move on your part, because in the future, when we have another assessment, you're going to have to explain to me why you built the equation the way you did. And so that's the point of this exercise, is for you to actually understand. So please don't just, copy down the key. Like, try to take your best guess first. Well, it shouldn't be, like an educated guess. talk to the people in your group. I know some of us don't necessarily like working with other people. We prefer to do things alone, but you really do learn more through discussion and talking about things. So it would be great if you would kind of unmute yourselves or type in the chat, either one. So I'm going to pause here for just a moment to make sure that we don't have any questions. So you're not doing anything right now, but building those models. So you're just going to each one that says model example 1, 2, etc. So you're going to scroll all the way down now to model 2. You're going to build a model and check it. Model number 3, do the same thing. And then model number 4, do the same thing. Don't do number 5. So what questions do we have right this second? I'm going to add a class comment to this assignment so that you guys have a little reminder while you're in your breakout rooms that all you need to do is build for now and don't do number 4. Okay, so any questions to anybody that we got?
We're also doing the step we put in why we did the steps.
For building it for right now, all you need to do is build it. So don't, like, you're going to see a part that says, like, explain step 1, explain step 2. We're not ready for that yet. All I want you to do is just build the models. And then I'm going to walk you through an example after you've had a little time to practice that. And I'll explain to you what I'd like you to do for step 1, step 2. Literally, all you're doing right now is just making yourself a pretty picture of an equation. Exactly like I did for number 1. So you can skip all this stuff right here that says step 1, step 2. All we're doing right now is building. So you'll go straight to model number 2, and you'll go right there to that one. Does that make sense? So let's talk about how we're going to solve these equations, because these are a little more complicated than the ones that we've been doing, right? Because the ones we had before, there were only 2 things that we needed to do in order to get the variable isolated. In this case, though, there's going to be more than 2 things in most cases. Because for one thing, the biggest thing that's jumping out to me is the fact that whenever we want to solve an equation, when we get finished, it should look something like this. You should have a variable on one side, just one single variable, and then you should have a number of some type on the other side. So one variable balanced out with one number. So obviously we've got a lot going on here, right? We've got one single variable over here, but then we've got, it's not isolated for starters, so we know we're going to have to get rid of that too. But then there's also another variable that is going to have to disappear. We're going to have to get rid of it. And this is something that a lot of students do incorrectly. They think that because you have an X over on this side, and because you have an X over here, that they're like terms, so you can combine them. You can't do that, though, because if this were just a regular old balance beam, right? Like in real life, instead of just a drawing, if this were just a regular old balance beam, you can't take the X and just move it over here, because the balance beam would go all haywire. It wouldn't be balanced anymore. So because they're on opposite sides of the equation, you cannot just combine those variables. So what you're going to have to do instead is you're going to have to cancel one of those variables out. And it actually doesn't matter which one you eliminate. You could decide that you want to get rid of this X, or that you want to get rid of that negative 4X. I'll tell you what I personally always do is I you know, I've told you that I'm kind of, I struggled with math when I was a kid. I'm a little emotionally scarred. Negatives were always where I made my mistakes. So typically when I am faced with an equation like this one, there's actually a lot of different things I could do for my first step. Let's just set, like, I know that one of those numbers, like for example, I know that plus 2 is going to have to go eventually so that we can get the x by itself, right? So I could start off by subtracting 2 from both sides if I wanted to. Or I don't have to, but I could go ahead and cancel out this x. I'm not going to do that though. Again, I'm going to start here because one of those variables is going to have to go eventually, because again, solving an equation always needs to look like this. A single x left over and then a number out to this side. So we know that one of those variables is going to have to go eventually. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the negative variable, because that is more often than not when I make mistakes, is when I have negatives. So let's consider what is going to cancel out negative 4x's. Well, the same way, what if I were just trying to cancel out a negative 4? I would obviously cancel that out with a plus 4, right? We know that we know how to do that because we've been doing that for a minute. X's are no different. You can actually cancel out a negative 4x by doing exactly the same thing as you would if it were just a regular old number. We're going to cancel out a negative 4x with a plus 4x, because positive 4 is the opposite of negative 4. Positive 4x is exactly the same thing as a negative x. So what would it look like in the model if I wanted to add 5 x's? What I would do is I would drag, right? I would drag 1, 2, 3, and 4 positive x's over there to the right-hand side of the equation. And what's going to happen when the negative 4 and the positive 4 x's get together is that they are just going to cancel each other out. Because again, negative 4x is the same thing as a positive 4x. Or, I'm sorry, is the opposite of a positive 4x. So if I combine a negative 4x and a positive 4x, they're just going to cancel each other out, so that all I'm going to be left with is that 17. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to go in here, and the easy thing to do is I am just going to delete all of those x's, except I just realized I forgot a very important step that I forgot to tell you guys to do. I did not follow the directions. Okay, so what I should have done, so I built my model. Let me go back in here and unmess up my model here. Move those x's back over, because I want to be able to see all your steps as you go through them and do each step. And sorry that I had a brain cramp moment. I forgot to tell you this part. So hold on, I'm going to go back and undo what I just did. Get rid of those. Thanks for your patience, guys. Sorry. All right, so before I do anything, I'm actually going to follow the directions. I'm going to right-click on my model above. So see where the directions are right here. So now we've built our equation. Now we're going to do step 1. So I'm going to make a copy of my model. So I'm going to do that by right-clicking. I'm going to click copy. And then I'm just going to click paste, Control V right here, to give myself a copy of what I've already done. And then now I'm going to go through and I'm going to add those 4 x's. We're going to assume I've already done that though, because I already kind of showed you how to do that. So again, those x's are going to cancel out. So I'm just going to delete all of those x's. And again, the reason I deleted those x's is because negative 4x plus a positive 4x is going to cancel. Now, exactly the same way, if I added a number to one side of my equation, I have to add it to the other side, right? Variables are the same way. If I added 4 x's to that side of my equation to cancel out that -4, I have to do the same thing over here as well to keep it in balance. So you can either drag 4 more over here. You can use a text box to type it in there, whatever you want to do. But when all is said and done, I had 1 x to start, and then I've got to add 4 more. So what is going to be my equation now? So I need to change my equation as well. So I added 4 x's to this side. So I've got to add 4 x's to that side. And remember that you can't combine an x and a 2. So that's why we didn't add 4 to that. So my very first step, I said, you know what? One of those variables has got to get out of here. I'm going to cancel out that -4x with a +4x. And I have to do it to both sides. So once I get finished with step 1, on my left-hand side, I should have 5x + 2. And on the other side, I should only have 17. I'm going to save and close. And for step 1, type a verbal description. Be sure to say why you performed the step. This right here is the most important part of this entire activity. Okay? To cancel -4x. So why did I do it? I did it to cancel a -4x. I added a +4x. And you can actually check yourself to make sure that you did the equation correctly simply by expanding the answer key, and you can see that my answer matches this one right here. Now, you don't necessarily have to do it the way that I just did it. There's actually 4 different ways you could have done step 1 and still done it correctly. And that's where I want to make sure I highlight that before we get out of here today. So I'm actually going to make another copy of our original equation. I'm going to put it here to show you that you could have done it a different way as well. So maybe you're not like me and you're not paranoid of negatives. Maybe you decided, hey, it's easier to me. It makes more sense for me to cancel out that x first.
What's that, Dad?
I'm sorry, what? What'd you say, honey?
Sorry, I'm muted.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
Sorry, I was confused for a second.
Oh, okay. No problem. So I personally am always going to go for the variable that has a negative or for the variable that's smaller. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you want to cancel out a +x. Guess what? You can do that. What is the opposite of a +x? The same way that -1 is the opposite of a +1, right? What if I have 1? It gets canceled out with a -1. X gets canceled out with a -x. So when we call something negative, when we say negative, that really means that we're taking it away. So I'm literally going to take that x, I'm going to push delete. I'm literally going to take that x away. What you do to one side, however, you have to do to the other, right? So if I subtracted x over here, I have to subtract x over here. This is why I decided to get rid of the negative, because I feel like it's less confusing. If you already have 4 negatives and you take away an x, that's exactly the same thing as putting another negative in there. So I'm not going to add, so I'm actually going to add one of these. So that subtraction is the same thing as a negative. So if I subtracted an x from one side, Oops, sorry. My thing just did something goofy. I have to subtract an x from the other side, so those will cancel. I'm left with a 2, and then on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, now I have 17 minus 5x. So if you decided to go that route, you're going to take a look at like this one, answer number 1 isn't going to match yours because you didn't do anything wrong, you just did it a different way. So now you need to look at a different one and see if it matches. And so if I look at number 2, oh, there we go. So that one matches. So the part that drives kids crazy, especially smart kids that like really care like you guys, is that it's going to bother you when we do more of this on Thursday, that there's more than one right way to do it and get to the same answer. But that's definitely the most important part of it, is to know that there's multiple ways that you can do it while getting it correct at the same time. So we're going to talk more about this on, what day is that? Thursday. Remember, this is classwork. You do not have to do this between now and Thursday. You should be working on your homework. And remember, if you need to have an opportunity to redo your two-step equations mastery, meet me at 1 o'clock tomorrow at that link. But if something comes up so that you can't do it at 1 o'clock, message me and we will figure something out. Have a great day off tomorrow. If you've got an older person in your family that hasn't voted yet, please encourage them to vote because Lord help us. Man, this is an important election. And you guys have a great Tuesday. I'll stick around for a second in case you guys have any individual questions. But other than that, I'll see you in a couple of days. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.